expected in Q2 and pushed up forecasts for the full year. Momentum in economic activity has held up after that as well, but growth is expected to slow down a little bit here on. Now, for the full year, GDP growth is projected at 7%. That's according to the RBI. Q3 is projected to grow at 6.5%, while Q4 is expected to grow by 6%, with risks evenly balanced. Now, we ran a quick sentiment analysis, and that showed a rise in positive sentiments around the domestic economy. And this was not just local, mind you. This was also global institutional sentiments. IMF projects growth in India to remain strong at 6.3% both in FY24 as well as in FY25, with an upward revision of 0.2 percentage points for FY24, reflecting stronger than expected consumption during this year. The World Bank actually trimmed India's GDP growth forecast for FY24 to 6.3% from 6.6% previously, but this was in June, so it is a tad dated. Meanwhile, the IMF released a discussion paper in December and reaffirmed that growth is expected to remain strong in India. Going forward, the country's foundational digital public infrastructure and strong government infrastructure program is expected to continue to drive growth. India has the potential for even higher growth with greater contribution from labor as well as human capital if reforms are implemented. That's according to the IMF as well. They continue to also recommend ambitious medium-term consolidation efforts given elevated public debt levels and contingent liability risks. What's also made news in recent days was the IMF's reclassification of India's de facto exchange rate regime to stabilized arrangement from floating for December last year to October this year. However, the central bank pushed back against the move. Now, moving on from the IMF to global rating agencies. Not too long back, Fitch Ratings raised India's medium-term potential GDP growth. Potential growth has been increased by 0.7 percentage points and is now at 6.2%, given an improvement in employment as well as an increase in the working age population forecast. So that was according to Fitch Ratings, but it reaffirmed that the economy remains below its pre-pandemic growth trajectory. The cumulative shortfall in the projected level of GDP by 2027 is still projected at 5.8%. So moving on, Moody's also believes that the country's growth momentum remains strong and forecasts the economy to grow by 6.6% for FY24, followed by slower growth thereon. Meanwhile, S&P Ratings revised its India GDP growth forecast for FY24 to 6.4% from 6% previously. S&P Ratings also expects India to be the third largest economy by the year 2030. And this year, momentum from weaker exports seems to have been balanced by stronger domestic growth. Not too long back, we also spoke to Sonal Verma, who's the chief India economist at Nomura. She explained why she considers India to no longer be the typical EM that people have in mind, and that was predominantly because of India's monetary and fiscal policies in recent times. So now, what's the year ahead looking like? The RBI, in its latest bulletin, has said that broad-based strengthening of economic activity is underway and will likely be sustained by easing input costs and corporate profitability. CPI inflation is projected to ease to 4.6% in the first 3 quarters of FY25. We'll continue to bring all economic updates even going on to the next year. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Pallavi, for getting us the details. This gives us a good roundup in terms of how FY23, I beg your pardon, 2023 has been and what we have in store for 24 from a broad economy perspective. But moving on from macro cues to markets this year, how did the IT stocks perform? Who were the top gainers and losers this year, and which stocks performed the best? Mika and Himansh are joining us to break it up for us in terms of The benchmark indices, broader markets, what worked, what did not work. Himansh and Mika, over to you guys.
Yes, well, we just closed the last trading session of 2023 just a few minutes back, and what a great run it's been, with the benchmark posting more than 20% returns this year.
That's absolutely right, Mihika. It's been a phenomenal year for the markets. Nifty and Sensex both clocking nearly 20% on year. And it's the 8th year of positive returns, and it's the 4th best in the past 10 years. And if one goes to see, it's been a choppy ride, really, over the past years, but we have still managed to post some significant gains, standing tall amongst emerging markets. Now, if one goes to see, what really stood out to me this year, Mihika, was the fact that mid-caps and small caps were really the ones exhibiting leadership, really. You know, mid-cap 100 was up 46% on year. 93 stocks from the mid-cap 100 pack closed in the green, and they also saw the best year in terms of momentum. I mean, 25 days consecutive sessions, you saw gains of, upwards of 1%. And what's really been playing out with the small cap as well, 86 stocks in the green. You have 14 days of consecutive sessions in terms of gains. And the momentum really in terms of gainers and losers. It's very interesting to see that you have the likes of REC and PFC in the mid caps that posted, gains of 3.5 times to 3 times. You're seeing the power theme play out here. Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders was one of the beneficiaries towards defense indigenization. In terms of the mid cap laggards, you had Aditya Birla Fashion, ACC, Crompton Greaves Electronics, as well as Gujarat Gas. Take a look at small caps. BSE tops the list with 4x returns in 2023, and it also had its best year ever in terms of such returns. You had Suzlon Energy, again, a beneficiary from the renewable energy push. Apar Industries, Zinsar Technologies posting gains of nearly 3 times and over. Then take a look at small cap laggards. You have Campus Activewear. That was down 32% on year. Easy Trip Planners. Now, that's a very interesting one. After a record subscription of 159 times, it actually closed in the red this time, 25% down. So the second, topmost laggard in terms of small caps. But could you tell us more about what the sectors really performed like this year?
Yes, so let's break it down sector-wise, shall we? And all the major Nifty sectoral indices have closed on a positive note this year. And let's talk about the Indian housing market. I mean, it's propelled the Nifty Realty to be the top performer this year, and it's up over 81%. And the real estate upcycle has really benefited the index, with Prestige Estates, DLF and Brigade Enterprises leading the gains. But Prestige Estates did stand out as it posted more than 150% in gains. Then we also had Nifty Auto, which was the second top performing sector. It was up 47%, and it was on the back of different factors: steady demand, low input prices, low input costs, price hikes and new launches. And then we had Tata Motors and Bajaj Autos who led the gains, and Tata Motors in fact was the sole Nifty 50 stock to double in 2023, and it posted gains of over 100%. Then we had Nifty Pharma, which did recover from 2022's downtrend, and it's up over 32% this year, with Aurobindo Pharma and Glenmark Pharmaceuticals leading the gains and ranging around 100 and 150%. But let's talk about the sectoral laggards. Nifty Bank was the top underperformer this year. It saw an 11% uptick, in the top laggards were Bandhan Bank and Kotak Mahindra Bank. Then we had Nifty Oil and Gas, which was the second underperformer. It was up 12%, and the sector did see volatility due to geopolitical tensions. And the top two laggards were Adani Total Gas and Gujarat Gas, that did close in the red. And then finally we had the financial services, which were up 12%, and it's a surprise given the RBI's tight grip this year, and SBI Cards and Payment Services was the only constituent to close in the red.
That's right, Nika, but it's still remarkable how all the sectors managed to close in the positive this year. Well, lastly, you have the large caps that were overshadowed by the small and mid caps, but still not forgotten. You have NTPC and Tata Motors that are logging in the best returns. Tata Motors on account of doubling, as well as NTPC logging in 87% gains on year. L&T, Coal India, again, beneficiaries towards the push towards power, as well as, towards defense indigenization, as well as other project wins. Lastly, in terms of laggards, you had UPL and Adani Enterprises were the only two counters on the Nifty 50 to close in the red. It was a tough year for chemicals on account of Chinese dumping as well as destocking. Adani Enterprises, from early year lows, has recovered by 140%. It will be interesting to see, though, in 2024, if large caps are going to be passed and, receive the baton from small and mid caps. So stay tuned for more.
Thank you, Himansh and Mika, for getting us the details. So that was a roundup of how the markets were with regards to where 2023 goes. But let's talk about the domestic investors. Yes, we're talking about the mutual fund industry. Which mutual funds were at the top of the class in 2023? My colleague Alex does the number crunching for us and gets us all the details. Alex, over to you.
Well, absolutely. And, my colleagues have described what a year it has been for the Indian equity markets. And as a result of that, as a consequence of that, it's been a fantastic year for mutual funds as well. Before we delve a little deeper into the winners in the few categories that I've spoken about, let's talk about a few very important highlights. In all probability, based on what we've seen in the markets, we've seen the mutual fund industry that has likely crossed an assets under management of 50 lakh crore in December. You'll get a confirmation of that in just about a week or 10 days from now. So that's a very important landmark to have crossed. A very important aspect is the inflows through systematic investment plans. That, as of the end of November, stood at 1.7 lakh crore. And if the trajectory is going to continue in December as well, we will likely see that number come very close to the 2 lakh crore mark. What's more, you also saw a 15% increase in the number of MF folios. And what that means is that the number of investors have grown to over 4 crore because each individual generally holds about 4 folios. Let's now take a look at some of the key performers. I've broken this down into 4 large buckets because this more or less captures the equity landscape. In the large cap space, you had Nippon India that ruled the roost, comfortably gaining over 30%. And this has remained quite a consistent performer over the last 3 and 5 years. Bank of India, a relatively smaller mutual fund scheme, has also outperformed, but HDFC Top 100 has also gained, probably on the back of its bets that have paid off in the PSU side. Now, in terms of the mid-cap space, you once again have Nippon India that rules the roost, and you have Mahindra Manulife, which is a much smaller scheme, and as a result of which it has been much more nimble. Just about 2,500 crore of market capitalization, but it's been able to select stocks that have done very well. JM Midcap Fund has also gained 46% or thereabouts. And by the way, you must have seen that the index itself, the Nifty 150, gained about 42%. What has been very characteristic is that the large cap space saw a lot of actively managed funds outperform the benchmark. That hasn't been the case for the mid cap space as well as the small cap space. Let's look at the winners in the small cap space as well, and you will see that Mahindra Manulife once again makes it to the top of the list. Once again, in all probability, because it has managed to stay nimble in its stock selection, and it is only a fund which is about a year old. So some of the mistakes that were made by some of its peers in the space, to the extent of allocation towards chemical, has not had a bearing on their performance this year, which is why they ended up with gains of 57%. Bandhan and ITIC small cap were the other big performers. Now, we also looked at flexi cap because this is where fund managers have a blank slate to do whatever they want with the asset allocation. And here too, you've got a significant outperformance by 3. And of course, there were a few other schemes that also performed, but these stood out. GM Flexi Cap has gains of 39%, and the other two had about 33% and 38% respectively. Now, the index that we look at as a benchmark here is the Nifty 500, which has gained about 17%. So if you did get into a flexi cap scheme, and one of these indeed, you have comfortably beaten the benchmark. Now, we also looked at the top performing mutual fund schemes across categories, and no surprise here, all 3 of these are thematic or sectoral funds. The top fund, and this is something that is played out in active strategies across the board, PSU has been the big winner, gaining about 59.5% in the year. You also had HDFC Infra, which, based on the stocks that my colleagues have pointed out, is another theme that played out. And power and infra from the Nippon stable has also done incredibly well. I will end this small conversation with you with a quick check on the SIP figures, because that, I said, has been a very major highlight. If you look at the average contribution through SIP, that has stood at over 15,000 crore rupees. And what is interesting is, if you look at July onwards, every month has been a new record. The question is, does that continue into 2024?
Absolutely, Alex. This is going to be interesting for us to watch out for as well, whether the SIP investments do continue or not in 2024 and keep making new record highs. So that was the best of the mutual fund industry in 2023. But let's quickly slip into a short break. Stay tuned. We'll be back with lots more about 2023 as a year. This is NDTV Profit. Welcome back. You're watching the best of 2023. Now, moving on, it was among the biggest news of 2023, making big headlines across the markets, in the corporate sector, and opposition parties trying to latch on to the issue. Yes, we are talking about the fall and rise of the Adani Group following the ambush from short seller Hindenburg allegations. Now, the Adani Group actually withstood all the shocks, fought back and restored confidence. The group signed off the year with a renewed commitment to push growth. Vikas Sinha takes us through the remarkable comeback story from then to now. Let's listen in.
साल 2023 अदानी ग्रुप के लिए काफी एक्शन भरा रहा। इस पूरे साल के दौरान ग्रुप को लेकर कई खबरें आई। हम एक एक करके पूरी टाइमलाइन को देखेंगे कि कब कब क्या खबर आई और उस पर स्टॉक ने कैसे रिएक्ट किया। सबसे पहले 9 जनवरी 2023 जब अदानी ग्रुप का मार्केट कैप अपने हाईएस्ट लेवल पे था, यानी 19,41,000 करोड़ रुपए का मार्केट कैप था अदानी ग्रुप का 9 जनवरी 2023 को। इसके बाद 25 जनवरी को शॉर्ट सेलर हिंडनबर्ग की तरफ से एक रिपोर्ट आती है जिसमें अडानी ग्रुप पर कुछ एलिगेशंस लगाए जाते हैं। इस एलिगेशन के बाद ग्रुप के शेयरों में थोड़ी गिरावट देखने को मिलती है और मार्केट कैप घटकर 18,19,000 करोड़ रुपए पर आ जाता है। 25 जनवरी को ही ग्रुप की तरफ से यह कहा गया कि हमारे एफपीओ यानी हमारे फॉलो ऑन पब्लिक ऑफर को नुकसान पहुंचाने के लिए यह रिपोर्ट पब्लिश की गई है। इसके बाद 27 जनवरी को अडानी ग्रुप का $2.45 बिलियन का ये एफपीओ खुलता है। 28 जनवरी को ग्रुप ने यह कहा कि हमारे एफपीओ को लेकर जो प्लान है उसमें कोई बदलाव नहीं है। इसके बाद 29 जनवरी को अडानी ग्रुप की तरफ से 413 पेज का एक रिबटल पब्लिश किया जाता है, जिसमें हिंडनबर्ग के आरोपों पर पॉइंट वाइज एक जवाब दिया गया है, जिससे बताया गया है कि ग्रुप पर लगाए गए आरोप कैसे सही नहीं हैं। इसके बाद 31 जनवरी को जो ये एफपीओ है, जो देश का सबसे बड़ा एफपीओ है, वो फुली सब्सक्राइब हो जाता है, यानी पूरी तरह भर जाता है 31 जनवरी 2023 को। फुली सब्सक्राइब होने के बावजूद अडानी ग्रुप ने 1 फरवरी को यह ऐलान किया कि वो एफपीओ को वापस ले रहे हैं। अडानी ग्रुप के चेयरमैन गौतम अडानी ने यह कहा कि मार्केट के उथल पुथल के बीच हमें नैतिक रूप से यह सही नहीं लगा कि हम इस एफपीओ को कंटिन्यू करें, इसलिए बोर्ड ने यह फैसला किया है। इसके साथ साथ उन्होंने 2 अहम बातें कही। उन्होंने ये कहा कि इसका कोई असर हमारे ऑपरेशंस पर नहीं पड़ेगा, और साथ में उन्होंने ये भी कहा कि हमारे बिजनेस प्लान फुली फंडेड हैं। इसके बाद 2 मार्च को एक बड़ी डेवलपमेंट होती है, जब जीक्यूजी पार्टनर अडानी ग्रुप के अंदर $1.87 बिलियन का निवेश करता है और इसके बदले 8.2 मिलियन शेयर्स वो खरीदते हैं। अब यहां पर अगर आप देखेंगे तो मार्केट कैप 19,41,000 करोड़ रुपए से घटकर 8,51,000 करोड़ रुपए पर आ चुका है। यहां पर आप देखें 2 मार्च को। इसके बाद 2 मार्च को एक और डेवलपमेंट होती है, जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट एक एक्सपर्ट कमेटी का पैनल गठित करता है और कहता है कि आप हिंडनबर्ग के आरोपों की जांच करें। इसके साथ साथ वो सेबी से भी कहता है कि आप अपने जो आपकी जांच चल रही है उसके आउटकम को हमें बताएं। इसके बाद 27 मार्च को सुप्रीम कोर्ट में एक और डेवलपमेंट होती है, जब वो डीआरआई की तरफ से जो पिटीशंस फाइल होती हैं अडानी ग्रुप के सब्सिडरीज पर, उसे सुप्रीम कोर्ट डिसमिस करती है। 29 अप्रैल को सेबी सुप्रीम कोर्ट पहुंचती है और ये कहती है कि हमें जांच के लिए थोड़ा और समय चाहिए। 2 मई को इसका विरोध पिटिशनर्स की तरफ से किया जाता है कि सेबी को जांच के लिए और समय नहीं दिया जाना चाहिए। इसके बाद मई के महीने में तीसरे हफ्ते में सुप्रीम कोर्ट के पैनल ने अपनी रिपोर्ट को फाइल किया और यह कहा कि हमें कोई ठोस सबूत हिंडनबर्ग के आरोपों में नहीं मिले। हमने जो जांच की उसमें हमें ठोस सबूत नहीं मिले। इसके साथ साथ उन्होंने 2 बातें कही। उन्होंने ये कहा कि अडानी ग्रुप ने इन्वेस्टर्स का कॉन्फिडेंस रीस्टोर करने के लिए कई अहम कदम उठाए। साथ साथ उन्होंने ये भी कहा कि फॉरेन एंटिटीज ने इस बीच में शॉर्ट सेलिंग करके काफी पैसे कमाए हैं। 14 अगस्त को सेबी वापस सुप्रीम कोर्ट पहुंचती है और ये कहती है कि हमें जांच के लिए थोड़ा और समय चाहिए, क्योंकि हमें विदेशों से भी जानकारी जांच के लिए मंगानी पड़ रही है और उसमें समय लग रहा है। 31 अगस्त को ओसीसीआरपी की तरफ से एक रिपोर्ट आती है अडानी ग्रुप के ऊपर, जिसमें फिर से अडानी ग्रुप पर कुछ आरोप लगाए जाते हैं। 2 सितंबर को अडानी ग्रुप ओसीसीआरपी के आरोपों को रिजेक्ट करती है, कहती है कि ये आरोप सही नहीं है। इसके बाद कुछ आरोप और आते हैं और ग्रुप के ऊपर वो आरोप लगाए जाते हैं। कुछ खबरें भी आती हैं, फाइनेंशियल टाइम्स में कुछ खबरें आती हैं, लेकिन इसके साथ साथ आप अगर देखेंगे तो मार्केट कैप घटता जा रहा है और एक उतार चढ़ाव मार्केट कैप में एक तरह से दिख रहा है। 11 लाख करोड़ के आसपास का मार्केट कैप इस वक्त आपको दिख रहा है। फिर 24 नवंबर का दिन आता है और सुप्रीम कोर्ट दोनों पक्षों की सुनवाई के बाद अपने फैसले को रिजर्व रखती है। इसके साथ साथ सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने अपना रुख भी इस दिन साफ कर दिया और यहां से ग्रुप के शेयरों में एक बार फिर से तेजी देखने को मिलती है और मार्केट कैप धीरे धीरे बढ़ता है। फिर 5 दिसंबर को यूएस गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से, अमेरिकी सरकार की तरफ से एक पॉजिटिव खबर आती है, जब वो हिंडनबर्ग के लगाए गए आरोपों को इररिलेवेंट कहते हैं। जो अडानी ग्रुप के ऊपर आरोप हिंडनबर्ग ने लगाए थे उसे वो इररिलेवेंट बताते हैं। इसके बाद 26 दिसंबर को अडानी ग्रुप के प्रोमोटर्स ने यह ऐलान किया कि वो अडानी ग्रीन के अंदर, जो उनकी सब्सिडरी कंपनी है, उसके अंदर 9,350 करोड़ रुपए का निवेश करेंगे। तो ये था पूरा समअप साल 2023 में अडानी ग्रुप के लिए।
Thank you, Vikas, for getting us the details. So, well, that was a comprehensive analysis from the team at NDTV Profit. Thanks for watching and wish all our viewers a happy new year.
The curtains are down on the final day of trading in 2023 to what has been the fourth best year for the Nifty in the past decade. The Nifty and the Sensex closed the year with a gain of 20%. The mid-cap 100 and the small-cap 100 logged their best gaining streak this year. Tata Motors and Bajaj Auto lead the Nifty from the front. As for the sectoral gainers, real estate and autos top the charts. HUL faces pressure from distributors after cutting margins because of slow demand. The apex distributor body has urged HUL to maintain 5% margin base. December auto sales are expected to fall compared to sales in November. Passenger vehicles are likely to lose steam. We bring to you the analyst poll. Should you brace for more expensive mobile bills? Airtel hints at tariff hikes ahead of elections. Hello and welcome. You're watching The Reporter on NDTV Profit and I'm your host Pallavi Nahata. The final market session of the year 2023 has concluded and what an year it's been. Let's look at the action today. On Dalal Street, it was choppy. Volatile trade through the day. The Sensex and the Nifty extended losses as ICICI Bank, Infosys and Reliance Industries dragged. The Sensex and the Nifty managed to come off the day's lows in the second half of the session, but ended the day in the red. The Sensex closed about 2% lower at 72,240. The Nifty too closed about 2% lower in the red at 21,731. Meanwhile, the biggest winner today was Tata Motors. The stock zoomed on the back of news that India might swap 8 lakh diesel buses with electric buses. Tata Motors closed about 3.5